Hello and welcome to the Learn to Code podcast here at 1 Month. My name is Chris, and on this show, we often talk with people who taught themselves how to code and got a job as a result doing something awesome, whether it is a developer or a lot of times, non-traditional things like product managers who know how to code, or entrepreneurs, lawyers, MBAs, all people who are learning to code and really upskill and make their job and career awesome. So that's what we do in most episodes. And then every now and then I do these short episodes, which I focus in on one topic. In the past few shorts, I talked about starting with a website. How do you start building a website if you want one? Some options that you can do, and really when not to build a website. I gave you some options for when not to code and some really simple things you can do to start to gain traction with users. Now, in this episode, the question is, what is the difference between front-end and back-end, front-end developers and back-end developers? And this question comes up if you want a website and you need to hire someone to build that website. Often you will see there are two kinds of developers, front-end and back-end, and sometimes full stack, which is basically someone who knows both front-end and back-end. This also comes up if you're learning the code. You may see that there's courses on front end and back end. And so no matter who you are, if you're learning to code or you're trying to build something, these things come up a lot. And so in this episode, I want to break those down for you so you know either who to hire or where to get started learning. Okay. First off, with a definition, front end versus back end developers, what's the difference? So front end, when we talk about a website, we're talking about websites right now. Front end is everything you see on a website, okay? So if you imagine, for example, the Zappos.com website, front end is going to be the shoes, it's going to be the fonts, it's going to be the colors and the layout. Front end is what you see, okay? Front end, what you see. On the other hand, back end is how the site works. It's going to be the functionality. It's going to be when you log in, all of the data that you have that goes into the database. It's going to be as you're coming from page to page, from the home page, to buying a shoe, to putting it in the cart, right? All of these things are the back end. This is going to be, does the user go here or here? Do they need to be validated? Do we need to worry about security? It's going to be questions like, if 10,000 users sign up overnight because our site blows up, the back-end person is going to have to figure out a way, or hopefully have already thought of a way, to scale the site to handle that kind of traffic. The back-end, again, to say it again, is how the site works. So to repeat it one more time, and I'm going to quiz this at you, say it aloud. Front-end is how the site, what? Looks. Yeah. Back-end is how the site works. Looks, works, looks, works. We got that? Front end looks, back end works. Okay, we know what we're talking about. Okay. Now, if you are looking to become a front end developer or hire a front end developer, you need to know exactly what programming languages we're talking about that this person should know, because it's actually pretty easy. There's only three. There's three primary languages that a front end developer uses. Do you know what they are? If you know, say them aloud right now. You won't look silly. Trust me. Promise the guy on the podcast. He says that you won't look silly. You look great. Say it. HTML, CSS, and what? JavaScript. Okay. So these are the three front-end languages: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What you'll find is that front-end developers use all three of these languages together at the same time. It's not like, do I use CSS or HTML or JavaScript? But no, they each have different functions, and we'll go into that in a future episode of the podcast. Okay. So we have these three languages. These are front end. So you're using these. On the back end, there are different languages that we will consider. These languages are PHP, Ruby, Python, Java. There's a bunch of different back-end languages. The good thing about the back end, I think, is understanding that most back-end developers will know or choose one backend as like their main language. That's not always the case, but at least starting out, I would say just choose one, because that's more or less how a website works. You have these three front-end languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then you have these one backend language. You have maybe PHP, and together that's a website. HTML, CSS, JavaScript plus PHP equals a website, right? So you don't need to know every single language that's out there. When you see all these different languages, you really just need to know, the few front-end languages, the three front-end languages, and like one back-end language to get started. And then often, if you're a back-end developer, you'll want to know one of the database languages, which is almost in all cases SQL, right? So these are a bunch of the different languages broken down to you in a simple way. And that's how we can think of front-end versus back-end developers. Let's talk a little bit about the skills that a front-end developer needs. A front-end developer, because he or she is working on the appearance and user interface of the website, well, that person, the front-end developer, usually has some kind of aesthetic skills that are reasonable, like being able to work with a designer, maybe even being able to open up design like Photoshop or Sketch or Figma, one of these kind of design tools to work with images or do some layout or something like that. So we're talking again about the front end, doing some design, doing some layout, basics of color theory. These things are really helpful, as well as the front end developer should know, at least have an understanding of what's going on in the back end. If the front end developer isn't coding back end stuff themselves, at least you should understand the basics of it, have some basic back end skills. It's never cool to work with somebody who says, that's not my job, nobody wants to work with that person. You want to work with somebody who's going to be able to step up and say yeah, I could figure it out, or I could work with that person. And this is what I look for in a good front end developer. What else? I think a front-end developer should also know the basics of web hosting and buying a domain, all these kind of things. So just basic getting a site live and making it look good, but that's kind of where it stops. And where the back-end developer will take over is, looking at debugging the code, looking at thinking about how a user flows through the site, systematically from one page to the next. And, that whole kind of experience, at a data level, what data are we capturing? What are we not capturing? Do they need to be authenticated? Meaning, do you need to be signed in to view certain pages? Is the site secured? All of these kind of things are the back-end developer's job, as well as something called test-driven development, which you may not have heard about, but that's basically testing the site so that all the things on the site work before you launch it and the world can see it. There's ways to test it with test-driven development on a staging server, which is basically not the server, not the real world server, like a testing server. You can basically set all this up as a back-end developer. And these are the kind of things that I would expect somebody to be able to find the bugs and make it scalable and bulletproof before it even goes live. These are some of the things I'd look for a back-end developer to do. Let's talk salary. The average front-end developer will make about $70,000 USD a year. The average back-end developer will make a bit more. It's around $117,000 USD. These are numbers which I got from Glassdoor.com. I'll put the links down below, and I can verify it with my own personal experience to say, yeah, that's about right. What we're talking is around $50 an hour for a front end or around $65 an hour for back end. And I will say, I'll preface all of this by saying these are really just averages. It's going to depend. If somebody's been doing this for 10 years and they have, some really good specialty with JavaScript, for example, something like that, you could say whether they're front end or back end, it's probably not unlikely that they're going to charge maybe $120 an hour. You know what I mean? Something like that. Could even be $150 an hour for a really good back end developer. No problem. I've seen that, but it could be a lot less too. It could be around I don't know. I mean, you'll definitely see people on Upwork.com. If you ever go there, Upwork.com, you can just kind of get developers. I don't know. I was laughing because I don't know if Fiverr, I don't know if they probably also have developers for $5. Who knows? But Upwork.com, it's basically kind of like Fiverr, but a way of just a marketplace of developers. The quality is pretty great. I've used a lot of people on Upwork and had a really good experience. I think the software at Upwork, basically that they use to track progress and payment is really good. This is definitely not an advertisement for Upwork, but I'm just trying to give you a range if you haven't experienced it. The reason that people on Upwork are going to be cheaper is because they live in places often, where it's either cheaper to live or the economy isn't as good. And so you'll get just such a range of people. All the way to somewhere here, like in New York City, the average front-end developer, I said it was $70K on Glassdoor, that might be $100K in New York. So it's really going to range depending on all these things, depending on experience. But this should give you an example, an average around $70K a year for front-end, around $117 for back-end. Check out the website and the links that I'll provide for if you really want to go deeper into that or see some sites where you can hire front-end and back-end developers. Hopefully that was helpful, this breakdown of front end versus back end. If you want some more information on this, I have a blog post that I wrote that kind of details with definitions of all these different roles, as well as links to where you might be able to hire front-end or back-end developers or learn the skills to become front-end and back-end developers. There's also a video there where I take you through step-by-step a website. It's the Zappos site that I mentioned, and I'll show you exactly how to see in real time, front-end and back-end, because there's a way that you can see it. So all of that will be in the show notes and on our blog. You can check that out. I will say in closing, whether you are going to become a front-end developer or back-end developer or whatever, and all these languages that I mentioned, really the two most important languages that you should learn and need to learn, whether you're going to become either, or even if you're just managing these people, is HTML and CSS. Because how many websites on the internet do you think are made with HTML and CSS? Take a guess. Okay. All of them. Every single website uses these two languages, and you can learn it in, just like a few hours. You can learn the basics enough to be able to have a conversation and understand all of everything that these people are going to end up doing, whether it's front end or back end. So these two languages affect everything, and a foundation in them, being able to just launch a simple website using them, is really helpful. So I would say if you're getting started developing, or if you're going to be managing or hiring these people, those are two really foundational languages that you can start with. And so I'll put a link to all of these resources again and everything at onemonth.com. Just look at the blog and you will find more information. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Learn to Code podcast. If you'd like to subscribe, it is available. We are available. I am available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all the places where the podcast is. You can go to our blog at onemonth.com, our blog, to learn more, and all the show notes are there. And if you'd like to learn to code with me or anyone here at 1 Month, we have courses. And if you go, we'll have a special discount at onemonth.com/Chris loves you. If you go there, you get a special discount on any of our coding courses. So check that out. Write us if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.